Okay, so we are starting at 5:10 p.m. Thank you very much for participating in this first lecture and talk for Pride Queer Studies in 2022, yes. When we were compiling this program, I was working with Asya Lazarevic. She is a friend of mine who cooperates with Belgrade Pride, and we were thinking what kind of subjects to enclose in this edition of Queer Studies. So I personally wanted to do something that is actual, that is bothering like all of us, to approach some kind of social topics that are currently dividing different people and different approaches in Serbia. So I opted for something I have already been doing a few months ago at the Queer Zagreb Festival, and that is a huge debate on sex work and on transphobia. And those two subjects we will address on Thursday and Friday. Jelena Pope, she's currently visiting lecturer here at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory. She's doing her PhD about the drag scene in Belgrade, and her lecture about that will be on Wednesday. And I think it's very interesting to see how she connects socialism and drag expression. On Tuesday, we have Slobodan Markovic. He's going to deliver a lecture how anthropology of the 20th century contributed to acceptance of homosexuality in the Western societies. And today we are going to speak with Jelena Savic, a Roma feminist, who is going to talk about Gadjo, white privileges, possible alliances, racism, and other issues. Jelena, you're the first one to open the Queer Studies. I welcome you, and I invite you to start your lecture.
Okay, so, well, thank you very much, and that's an honor. I'm not really sure, like, it's going to be a kind of demanding lecture, let's say, because it's going to call for something that I know it's kind of difficult in the moment when there is like very, very visible and present oppression towards queer people. And what I'm doing is actually trying to complicate it a little bit more, the issue of oppression towards queer people, by introducing racial issues. So I think it's a very problematic for me to speak about these issues because I don't identify myself as queer, and I think personal experience is something that is really important to start with. And on the other hand, I am Roma, who is also able to conceptualize certain kind of ideas in a format which is required. I'm not sure I'm going to do it very successfully, but still, I think there is probably very, very few Roma who could actually participate in this event. And this is something that is troubling, and this is something that I problematize in this work. It's a very early paper, a very early draft, and I'm still conceptualizing it. And I have to say that in Roma studies, there are very, very few Roma intellectuals who could actually, deal with these issues and who want to deal with these issues. And there are just few Roma queer people who are academics also. And so I have to say that it's very difficult for me to produce this kind of papers because there is no grounding on which I can stand. This is, I don't know, part of what I will address as European Gadjo supremacy. This is the concept that I am developing. And what I wanted to say that epistemically, there is a very unprivileged position for knowledge producers such as myself. And that when what I'm doing here, I'm inventing epistemology. I'm inventing terms and concepts. So I want to say that this is the process, this is the paper and production in process. So I expect many discussions and like questioning of different kinds of ideas proposed here. So this is of course not to say, so how to say it? This is not to excuse myself or to put responsibility on other people. But I consider this situation a political issue, and I address it as such, because the responsibility for this situation, for not having Roma authors who can be Roma and queer and write about these issues, is a problem not just of Roma, but also of non-Roma people whom I address here as Gadje. Gadje is a term which is used in Roma communities for non-Roma. And in this context, I will use it to define non-Roma who are white, because non-Roma can also be non-white, but I will use this theory of whiteness to try to address this relationship between Roma and non-Roma, that is Gadje, who are also white. So, okay, here I'm relying on Mill and his idea of global white supremacy. And basically I'm developing my concept of Gadjo supremacy in analogy to this concept. So I will try to develop it a little bit just to give introduction and grounding for trying to conceptualize the position of queerness, queer Roma, basically. Yeah. So maybe you can put this little PDF that I sent you, Tushan. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, excuse me. No, what did you say?
Can you actually hear me? I'm not sure. Is it?
I hear you. But...
yeah. Did you get my document? I sent it on, I think, on Facebook or somewhere.
Document.
PDF.
I have where did you send the document? I'm sorry.
I think on Facebook.
You mean PDF? The PDF?
Yeah. It's like a picture, right?
Yeah, it's here. So what do I do with it? I'm sorry, I haven't noticed.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted it for people to see it, so it would be easier to.
Just hold on for a second. I just forwarded your file.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, until you put it on, maybe I can just say a few words. Yeah.
We can. But you want to continue, or you want us to open it up first?
Yeah, you can open it up if you can. But in the meantime, maybe I can just go.
Okay. So please continue, and we will try to open. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Untrained. Okay. So Jelena is continuing. We are opening the file. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, what I want to say is that Mills wrote about global white supremacy as a socio-cultural, economic, and political model of white domination. And for him, it's the global system basically of racism. And it is basically, he considered here global context. So it's not just related to USA. And usually when people speak about racism in Europe, people think about American context. But basically what Mills did, he establishes this system as a global system. And this system actually is providing a structure for domination of globally of white people globally. So this is a system that is providing different kind of privileges to people who are socially defined as white. Now, who is white? That is a relative term, of course, and he's not sticking to biological determinism, but it doesn't matter. Basically, through the geographical and historical lines, he says that whoever is defined as white, gets certain kind of white privileges. And he basically conceptualized it as, different kind of examples in USA, but, post-apartheid Africa, and you can even find it in Asia and whatever. So this is a global system. And it's not just a legal system. So basically, usually people think about racism through this, they say that racism is strictly defined through legal aspects. So this is chattel slavery and Jim Crow era in America and stuff like that. But it's not really, neither in just a legal sphere, nor in history. So it is a very wide concept addressing different areas of life and through past and present. So it's it's a certain kind of universalization, basically. And in this context, I just, in analogy, I'm trying to think about this, how this whiteness would apply in European context. So there you have a little sketch about it. So I'm just, let me just open it in my, yeah. So there is his definition, and you can see that white supremacy is multidimensional system of domination, not merely encompassing the formally political that is limited to juridic political realm of official governing bodies and laws, but extending to wide domination in economic, cultural, cognitive, evaluative, somatic, and in a sense, even metaphysical spheres. So this is a very wide concept, once again, and it relies on white racial frame. So it's an overarching white worldview, basically. So it consists of different kinds of stereotypes, prejudices, ideology, images, interpretations, etc. So I'm basing, when I'm trying to think about European context, so people would say usually, oh, Europe is different. It's, we have a certain kind of color blindness, which is traditionally present in European context, even though Europe is like a birthplace of racism. And when I'm thinking about it in the context of Europe, I would say that Europeans are basically, Europe is defined as, traditionally defined as a white place, as a continent of whiteness. And there is this Bonnet reference that European equals Christian, equals white, and equals human. And in this context, Bonnet did like a very extensive research on this, like how it come up that Europe is actually defined as white, even though different, different population lives there. But for me, it's important to think about Europe as white, and to understand how Roma are racialized in Europe as non-white. So this is kind of tricky question, but even though racialization of, in fact, Black people, like, you know, and Africa, from African descent, or like, you know, American background, doesn't matter, but discrimination of Roma and Black people who are actually Black can be different. So it is different. So I cannot really equate this kind of racism. But I'm trying to make this some kind of analogy. So, I'm basing this analogy on first on certain kind of knowledge and that exists and information about Roma, and it does exist, even though it's kind of a problematic knowledge. We had in Europe big European project which is called Decade of Roma Inclusion, and this project is how to say, it is based on a human rights paradigm. So mostly European governments decided to address the issue of Roma exclusion. So this is how they named the term. So this Europe doesn't use the term race and racism. So for the last maybe 20 years and even more, Roma and racism against Roma are treated through the concepts of nationalism, inclusion, and certain kind of data is collected to make evidence-based policy. And in this context, there is certain kind of knowledge, although this knowledge is produced mainly by non-Roma. And in that sense, it is problematic because you want communities to create knowledge about themselves. And I would say that in this context of European whiteness and what I would call European Gadjo supremacy, this was not possible. Still, this knowledge, certain kind of knowledge exists. So based on this knowledge, like which exists for like say 20 years, we can see that the position of Roma is a very difficult, mildly put, but that Roma are excluded from from places of political decision making. They're excluded from. They're very, very poor. Like they're in housing, in health, in all areas of life. You can basically see very big differences between Roma and non-Roma people, and in their situation. So this is some kind of problem, which is let's say empirical ground for some of my theoretical some considerations. And this is also visible in the sphere of culture, knowledge production. One of the problems why we don't have like queer Roma speaking about queer Romaness is the fact that there are no Roma basically for going through the educational system. Their access to information, to knowledge is very limited. So in this work, I would say that there are certain kind of socio-cultural, economic, and political preconditions which would lead to what I would call Gadjo domination over Roma. And that this can be used as to sustain the idea that there is something like Gadjo supremacy over non-Roma, over Roma, sorry. so that there is this kind of like European Gadjo supremacy, which actually means that if you're born as Roma, and if you're born as non-Roma, makes a huge difference. And that actually non-Roma holds certain kind of position which allows them certain kind of privileges, and that in this society, they can exercise power over Roma people in different areas. This, of course, means that there is also this cultural frame where we have different kinds of stereotypes, prejudices, images, ideologies, interpretations, and stuff like that. So certain kind of Gadjo racial frame, which we would say. And in this context, I also use the concept of Gadjo privileges. So I rely here on McIntosh and her ideas about white privileges. So what are white privileges? She defines them as invisible package of unearned assets, which I can count on, cashing in each day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious. So white privilege is like an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provision, maps, passports, code books, etc. So what does it mean, white privilege, in the context of Roma? It is something that is basically provided to Gadjo people just by the fact of them being Gadjo and not being Roma. And this, I just translated what McIntosh said. So that would be an invisible package of unearned assets that Gadjo acquire by the contingent fact of their birth in the families which are socially categorized as Gadjo or non-Roma, about which they usually stay ignorant. So, but they can cash them in every day. So there are different aspects of these privileges. I would say that Gadjo have certain privileges in different areas of life over Roma. These privileges are intersectional. So for Gadjo to be, they will just follow the rules of intersectionality, basically, that they compound. So if you're Gadjo and heterosexual and Gadjo and I don't know, rich, so it just gets bigger and bigger. And also that they extend through time and space. So basically they're transgenerational, and they go, if you go to, I don't know, Spain or Serbia, it doesn't matter, there are Gadjo privileges. And if you go in time, there you would find this kind of privileges. So basically, now I'm thinking about the conception of Roma nationality and all this. So basically, since it started to exist, I would say that there were Gadjo privileges. Right. So what is specific about them is also that they function on a zero-sum base. So if you have privileges like Gadjo, that means that somebody else doesn't have them and that somebody else is Roma. In that sense, they are unjust because they don't function on the principles of meritocracy, of course, which usually people who are colorblind or whatever, they use this as an argument against affirmative measures or whatever. And also that they're based on past injustices. So basically, we can speak about this through history. Right. So this is something that is just like a basic, I would say, basic idea. And if you can see different areas of life where you can find these Gadjo privileges, so injustice, political representation, culture, public spaces, social services, health, housing, employment, education, etc. So these are basically examples of privileges, and yeah, so I don't want to get too much into them. So I would just say that one of the privileges is Gadjo ignorance. Gadjo ignorance is also another term I use, I invented, and relying on white theory of whiteness. And there is something that's called white ignorance, and that's Mill's term also. Mill's term. So this ignorance is also a political issue, because it's not. It appears in the context of transferring from this epistemology, which is very individualistic and Cartesian tradition, and it goes to social epistemology, considering this kind of ignorance in a social context. So this racial epistemology is addressing then, distribution of knowledge as justified through belief, but also ignorance as absence and existence of false beliefs. So there are different kinds of things that I'm putting into this Gadjo ignorance. But the point is that it's a group ignorance, and that it's motivated, that it doesn't appear just like that. So it's basically even in the some cases, you can say that people are ignorant because there is lack of information. So this is something that it's a culpable, I mean, if information exists, but it's not really readily available, you can say that people can be ignorant and that they are responsible for this ignorance, but it's not such a severe case of morally, not moral act. Now, Dusan, you can just turn this off, because it's just examples of white privileges from McIntosh that I used as analogy. Just let me take my cable because my computer is low on battery.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, okay. So what I want to say is that it's not just like individual epistemic vice, but it's a political and motivated collective denial. It's a part of a system of dominance of white people on a big scale, basically. In European context, I would say this is specifically true for, in the context of knowledge about Roma, because you cannot really learn about Roma in that sense. It's not readily available knowledge. Roma are nowhere to be found. You cannot really read much about Roma history, culture. There are no, many public figures who can speak about, Roma issues or whatever. It's really, I understand that for the mainstream population, it might be difficult to acquire true beliefs about Roma. And Gadjo ignorance in that sense is in some way not so culpable. Even though as a group, I would say that Gadjo people contributed to this situation. So in some way they are responsible. And it's not that I'm like letting Gadjo people go for this absence of knowledge about Roma. Okay, so that's one case in European context. So we can say that Gadjo ignorance is really prevalent, and in that sense, very expected. But what I learned through my experience is that from some people from which I expected more, because some kind of knowledge about Roma is still available. I mentioned this decade of Roma inclusion and different kinds of projects and stuff, even though it's very technical knowledge and it focuses on, you know, very, some numbers about the position of Roma, and, you know, it's not very, this pool is very poor, very limited. Still, there are some information that is available to certain kind of people, I would say, prevalently to people who are involved in social issues. So here I'm on a, on a path towards queerness and queer people, but just I'm trying to generalize a little bit more and to say that there are two kinds of people that I would expect to be less ignorant about Roma and about racism against Roma. And these are people who are, so they do belong to marginalized communities. That's one case. And the other one is like people who are actually socially engaged, who are activists. So from these people, I would expect that they have this certain kind of knowledge. They are not, they're less Gadjo ignorant. They use their Gadjo privileges less, and that they contribute to the global, on the European Gadjo supremacy less. In this paper, I just wanted to try to think about this, how it happens that people from marginalized communities, so queer communities also, how is it possible that they can still be ignorant about these issues, racial issues, race, and anti-Roma racism, and also socially engaged people? Because from my experience, it happened too many times, and it is, I didn't actually introduce myself, so I'm actually active in different kinds of organizations and in social movements from, I don't know, just 20 years ago, I started maybe to be engaged and in these issues, in feminism and here and there, like a bit leftist, organizations and stuff. But I always somehow encountered different kinds of racism towards Roma. And so for me, it was difficult to understand why it happened. And one of the ways to try to understand it is through, having this kind of like political, ideological framework, and think that people are actually simply racist because they are, it just benefits them. So it might be different kinds of reasons why this is so. I mean, I'm trying to think about this in some epistemological terms and ethical terms. So there are marginalized people, why marginalized people might be racist still. My idea was that one thing can be that they are too invested in their own marginalization. So they are basically, even though information would be available to them in certain sense, because I would say that if you're socially engaged, this pool of information is somehow more available to you than to some general population. So this is one thing that you might miss it because you're you know, also that's for socially engaged people, but also for marginalized people, even though you don't have to be an activist if you're a marginalized person. Yeah? But still, if you are actually a marginalized person, you would be interested in social injustices towards at least your own self, but also it would be somehow more available to you, this, you know, knowledge and information about marginalization of other people, I would say. So that's my presumption. I don't know, it can be tricky, it can be contested, but yeah, that's how I see it. So basically you would be too engaged in your own issues, and then you don't have strength anymore to deal with other people's problems, whatever. So then, yeah, you are still ignorant in a certain way, and that's it. So, okay, so you can be racist in certain ways. But that's not such an interesting reason. I was thinking about the other possible reasons, and there would be this situation when you have your own marginalization and your own experiences. And from your own experiences, you understand what it means to be othered, dehumanized, marginalized, how it is to suffer different kinds of social injustices, suffering, exclusion, and stuff like that. So for you, it would be that you have certain kind of knowledge, and that in some way it happens that people generalize this knowledge that they have from their own positionality, and the things that they know enough, so that you have how to say, enough knowledge to, if you are LGBT or queer, whatever, how you define yourself, or a feminine or a woman, I don't know. So you would think that you know what it means to be, to suffer, or to be excluded or marginalized. And that what happens as a problematic step is this generalization then can be applied to Roma issues. For example, that you think you know about marginalization of Roma also. And this kind of generalization can be actually false. So that's one of the possible reasons why people stay ignorant about anti-Roma racism, for example, even though they are, I don't know, LGBT or whatever. So that might be one of the reasons that I came up with. And if you're socially engaged, for example, so this is applicable to if you are a person of certain marginalized identity. And the other case is when you are actually socially engaged. So if you are activist, and then you might also think you know, not from maybe from personal experience, maybe you're not, I don't know, queer or whatever, so you don't really have this personal experience, but you might participate in certain kind of activism. And then you become certain kind of expert in these issues. So in a matter of exclusion or suffering or whatever, I mean, you can be, I don't know, lawyer dealing with housing or with whatever, and you don't have to be of the identity of the people whose problems you are trying to solve, but you become a certain kind of expert. Your expertise then becomes an issue. That is, it becomes, there is this like inflated sense of competence, which you can then think you have about how social struggles should look like, how, I mean, this fight for social rights, how it should look like. And then you generalize it also to Roma issues. And so for me, that was very, so one is your own experience, which you generalize, and the other one is your expertise on social issues. that you generalize. And these might be epistemic mistakes, so to say. And because you have enough knowledge about either experiences of marginalized people or their fight and how the struggle for their rights should look like, you might be less motivated to actually learn and to know about Roma lives, Roma experiences, or the ways Roma want to fight for their rights or whatever. So these would be, so to say, in queer context, I would say that what would be the main takeaway is that queer experiences of Gadjo people might not be equal to queer experiences of Roma people. So that's a very simple proposition, very common sense, but it's not a common sense in practice. Because many people think, I mean, that's how I learned from experience, that their own experience is applicable to your own experiences. And so that's one thing that I would say, that the personal experience should be, of Roma should be accounted more. And the other thing is that queer activism, Gadjo queer activism is different, is not the same as queer Roma activism. I mean, when I say it's not the same, I mean that what you know about queer activism, what you believe that queer activism is, how it should look like, how you feel about it. So all this kind of stuff, that might be different for queer people who are Gadjo and who are not, and who are Roma. And this means that Roma people, queer Roma people, should have their own space for their own experiences. They should be more included in that sense in the processes of creation of politics, of queer politics, queer activism, and different kinds of things. I'm not saying any revolutionary statements here. I just think that this basic stuff is totally somehow not clear in practice. Yeah, so right. So that's from some epistemic side, I would say, some kind of generalization which are problematic, and then you can work with them. Right, and the other thing is, another aspect is more on ethical, or more on ethics. And here, again, I take these two categories, like marginalized Gadjo people and socially engaged Gadjo people, so Gadjo activists, and how there are certain kind of obstacles for them to know, because when you think you know enough, you don't have enough motivation to search for more information, for more knowledge, and to reach out to the sources of knowledge, and these are Roma, right? So on ethical terms, so for marginalized people, I would say that there is something about position of marginal people, something like there is a position of victim. And so this position is somehow, I would say, producing, can produce, doesn't necessarily produce, but can produce some false beliefs about moral infallibility. So it's like, I'm a victim of justice and a victim of injustice. So I am somehow, I have some kind of moral immunity. And it's of course not applicable in all cases. I would just say that this is something that I encounter from time to time, that people say that they're, I don't know, like victims of violence against LGBT people or something like that, so they cannot possibly be racist because they understand, they are victims. And somehow this is some victimization is providing certain kind of moral immunity in a certain way, which is unjustified. So it's kind of like, even though you're just in your position of victim in a certain way, it doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot be immoral in different kind of areas of your life. And this is something that somehow translates badly in terms of Roma. In general, marginalized people might have this kind of tendency to see themselves as victims and morally, superior in a way. But when it comes to Roma, it might be also specifically difficult to think that somebody who is already marginalized owes something in ethical terms to Roma, because I would say that in the context of European Gadjo supremacy, Roma are dehumanized and they barely count as subjects, as human subjects. And with this, they lack certain kind of ethical, like a moral status. And it's very low. It's very low, this status. And people don't usually think they owe much to Roma. So that's what I'm saying. And especially if they think they already, serve their what they owe to the society by being victims. So yeah, this is one of the situation when it might be difficult for Gadjo who are marginalized to actually have this kind of motivation, basically, to think about their own beliefs, their own acts in moral terms, and to think basically that they're possibly racist. So it's like a moral thing, right? So yeah, and the other thing is for socially engaged people, and with them, I would say in ethical terms, so what would be a reason why they would not consider this kind of issues in their own behavior and their own thinking. One thing is that people can be motivated simply as socially engaged. There is like a small elite of socially engaged people who might actually have like in economic terms, they might have certain kind of profit, and it might not be they might profit from their status of socially engaged people in economic terms. So they might be motivated to sustain their status of socially engaged people, but this is not so interesting in a certain way, because this status of socially engaged people, many people who are actually socially engaged are not profiting in any meaningful way in economic terms, but they're more engaged in social issues because of their personal values or worldview, or their perspective on how the world should look like, and based on their principles and stuff like that. So they have investment in this kind of engagement, but it's not really profit motivated, but it's like motivated by something else, so that's the social and the moral status of a socially engaged person, I would say.
Jelena, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to let you know that we have reached 6 p.m.
Okay, so I'm closing to the end. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so sorry. So yeah, just I would just say that there is like, so socially engaged people have certain kind of social and moral status. So this status brings certain kind of how to say, certain kind of values. It has so people who are socially engaged might be considered as important. They do something important. They participate in social processes, change social structures, intervene in social contracts, and similar things. So there is like certain kind of socially important position, even though mainstream society might totally treat you as you know, enemy of the state or whatever. In your reference group, this would still count. So this social status, and you would be considered important. And on the other side, you are considered socially responsible person. So somebody who is, you know, led by ideals, who is who can understand the injustices, who is moral and who is just. So this status of socially engaged people puts these people in direct opposition to social and moral fallibility. So there is certain kind of it's of course certain kind of mistake. It's a mistake in a certain way, because it's either you cannot be racist if you're a socially engaged person, which is failure. I mean, which is not true. So this is one of the things that I would say, that this exclusiveness and this ban on fallibility, basically, of socially engaged people is an obstacle which can be considered contributing to motivated ignorance, because you would not be, it is in the interest of socially engaged people to sustain this kind of image in a way. And also, I mean, you belong to this community based on these ideals, and you can face certain kind of rejection from the community of socially engaged people if you are not sustaining this behavior, or, you know, there is this kind of like, if your image about of socially engaged person is in a way harmed. So I would say that this is something that I encountered often in a way, because it was not possible to speak about racism in feminist movement for 20 years, I think. And my experiences in different organizations just showed that you would be simply excluded if you do that. And I would say this is some kind of evidence of epistemologically and morally fragile Gadjo communities of socially engaged people. In terms of queerness, that would be also applicable, because another thing is that, I mean, except the thing that I already said, that one thing is that queer experience is different from queer Roma experience, that queer activism is different from queer Roma activism. I would say here also that in these terms of ethics, queer people can be racist, and queer activists also can be racist. So that these are propositions which we should start with to actually have a meaningful debate about queerness and racism in the context of global Gadjo supremacy in which we all live. And I think I would just stop with this. And I don't know, it's too much maybe that there are too many information, but sorry. Yeah, okay. So that's it, Ushan.
Okay. Thank you, Jelena.
I don't know what is the procedure now, sorry.
Okay, are there any questions from the audience? Well, okay, I have one question, or it might be a comment. I remember when we talked about the certain words that trigger us in our daily life, and you've mentioned the term gypsy used in the negative context, how you constantly hear it and you're constantly being reminded of the fact that you belong to a minority that is facing racism. And then I said, well, it's very similar to the word fag when I hear it constantly in different contexts. So I'm constantly being reminded that I am gay, and that kind of remembrance is almost always in the negative context. But then I thought about the differences, because I asked a black friend from New York who told me that with racism, it is that you can never actually switch it off. He's gay and black man. So he said, sometimes I can switch off this idea that I'm being discriminated upon my gayness. Sometimes I can do, but whenever I open my eyes, I am aware of racism. And when I go to bed during the sleep, and sometimes even in my sleep, I'm being reminded that I'm a victim of racism. And I realized he was telling the truth, especially yesterday when I was coming back from meeting a friend of mine who is also gay. So we accidentally crossed our paths with the so-called Litia. I don't know how to translate it. It's actually a religious motivated protest against the gay pride. So we felt instantly this kind of uneasiness with it. And when I was waiting for my bus at Zeleni Venac, and they were constantly moving near us, and I was in this state of constant agitation and fear in a way. And then I met another gay friend of mine, and he's in the same state. And then I come back home and I start thinking about it and saying, okay, I mean, sometimes I think I can switch it off. Sometimes I forget it because I am, I don't know, engaged in circles that are not homophobic, but not openly homophobic. But this constant fear is there. Only I can sometimes like shut it down, or being in a way covered by some other noise. I think that's the difference. Sometimes we are being, I mean, that's a similarity. You and I are both sometimes being reminded where we belong in the center of, in the sense of hierarchies of races and sexualities. But I think racism is like there always. And homophobia, for me at least, I guess from a perspective of a gay man who lives in a small city, smaller environment, who can't find this space secure or so-called secure spaces, for him it might be even more strong experience if he's not out, if he doesn't have any gay friends. So yeah, we can make some kind of differentiation and parallels, I think, between the two regime of discrimination, between the racism and homophobia.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what is the question.
Well, a comment, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, well, I don't know, maybe, I'm not really sure. I cannot really say from this kind of experiences, I cannot really speak from this kind of experience, right? Because I don't do that for myself as queer, but I would say that I think it's the bigger problem would be that queer Roma people, it's the question if queer Roma people feel safe and not reminded about their Roma identity in queer communities, and in places which should supposed to be supportive and you know, safe or whatever. And what I learned is that it's never safe, and we should not presuppose that queer communities are safe for queer Roma people. So it's a false, proposition which comes from this idea that colorblind idea or the idea of racial harmony or whatever. So we should actually, to be able to have meaningful discussions about racism and queer identities and struggles, I think we should start from this proposition. We should start from the idea that that racism is prevalent, that it's everywhere, and that we are probably racist. And as for heterosexual people, that we are probably homophobic in certain ways. So this is how we could then try to address and see what actually we are doing wrong. I mean, what is to be open to a certain kind of criticism, to certain kind of to open the space for queer Roma people to actually feel that they can address these issues, because I'm not really sure now where queer Roma people. So, I know personally just one or maybe two people, and they're invisible. They're completely invisible. It's like queer communities in general are in a very difficult position, and it's very risky to be openly active, engaged, to participate in whatever, activities and stuff like that. But it's important for people to participate because they find their source of support there. And if you don't have support from your own communities, your family, and it's really important to have this kind of spaces and people, like queer people, who can actually support you in the different ways. And it's crucial for them to understand racism. It's crucial for them to be able to think about themselves as possibly being racist. Because it's not how to say. It's inevitable if you're taught from your early age, that Roma are something bad, something that they will steal you or whatever. If you went through the brainwashing, basically, of forcing you to think about the Roma in certain ways, it's very difficult, not to think about it. So I understand this. I mean, I would put on the side this very difficult accusing interpretations about that racism is benefiting Gadjo people. It's no question about it. But what we can do about it, that's the question. So if you have in this system certain kind of privileges, if you have Gadjo privileges, then you don't have to use them. So that's the point. So you can have them, still you will have them, wanted or not. So people say, oh, I'm not, I don't see myself as white. I don't see myself as non-Roma. I don't have nationality. I'm, whatever. But it doesn't matter how you identify yourself in a certain way, because the system is set in your favor. So what you can do is to try to think what you can do as a queer and Gadjo person, and what a Roma queer person does not have so available, and what you can do to make it available. So either about sharing knowledge, sharing information, I don't know, sharing resources, whatever is possible, whatever you can do. I mean, and think about giving space to people, to tell their own experiences and stuff like that. I mean, it seems like a common sense, but I'm telling you this because I learned it from feminist perspective, that it's not a common sense. It's never a common sense. Because, after 20 years of support, my activism lasts for say 20 years and even more. Feminists did support Roma women in different ways, but until today, there are no Roma leading this kind of organizations. They're not on managerial positions. They're not on different kinds of boards or whatever. They don't lead this kind of feminist politics. And Roma feminism in Serbia is basically non-existent after 20 years of support of Roma, to Roma feminism. And stuff like that. So it's never understood. It's supposed to be you're not supposed to assume this kind of thing. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, that in queer issues, I mean, queer movement is very small. There are not very many people. And, you know, I know only for one initiative that tried to support Roma queer people. But, I mean, it died. I don't know what happened with it, you know. So, yeah, I don't know, and get informed about what happens to Roma, and you know, do research about these issues, but don't try to, you know, do it in a certain kind of colonial way. So this is how knowledge production today functions, because, oh, this is a sexy topic, so I'm going to do Roma research about, research about queer Roma, whatever. And then you are the only author, and then you use queer Roma people as a source of information, and just, you know, extract their life experiences, and you build your own symbolic capital or whatever. I mean, this is not the way how it should be done. To be really in solidarity with queer Roma people, you should make it possible for them to conceptualize their own experiences, to produce their own tools to understand their own experiences. So this pool, this hermeneutical pool, should be, you know, produced and managed by them. So that's the point. And I'm tired of, you know, feminists asking me to provide my own experiences of Roma in feminism. And seriously, like, nobody asked me to be the author of some research study or whatever, or to teach me how to do research or whatever. So these are very important tools, you know, which you can share and, you know, help queer Roma people. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you. Do we have some comments or questions from the audience? Okay, the audience is shy. So Jelena, I thank you very much for your virtual participation. And we continue tomorrow with the lecture by Slobodan Markovic on how cultural anthropology and our different understanding of sex and gender made Western society more accepting of homosexuality. Thank you. Slobodan is going to be present here in person. Okay, thank you very much for your presence. Thank you very much, Jelena. Thank you very much, Institute, for your technical and welcoming support. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
So thank you also. Bye.